If your blood runs orange and blue, this is the pod for you. You're listening to Orange and Blue Bloods, hosted by EJ Stewart and Tommy Beer. Let's get to it, man.
Let's wrap the show talking about, again, a team that is not the Knicks, but is definitely impacting the Knicks right now in terms of what their offseason will look like. And that is the Dallas Mavericks. The Mavericks have been an absolute tailspin, and their struggles could impact the Knicks in a negative way. So let's explain this. The Mavs lost in OT to Atlanta on Sunday. They have fallen into
a wild game.
Wild game. Which, surprise. By the way, Tom, before I even get into this, I had to mention, did you see the John Hollinger tweet on the Hawks season and the numbers and just
Amazing.
how mid they are this season? I mean, they basically, for the entire season, in terms of the overall numbers, in terms of points allowed and points scored, they're essentially even for the entire season.
Yep.
They are 39-39 with a record.
Yep.
They are 39-39 with their record, so they're 500. They've scored 9,209 points. They've allowed 9,210 points. So that's literally a 1-point difference over the course of 78 games this season. They are 24-24 against the East, 15-15 against the West, and they are within one game of 500 for a 72 consecutive days. So all the talk about, the mid-3 with the Knicks, I mean, there's nothing more mid than what you're seeing from the Atlanta Hawks. That is a stunning stat, and shout out to John Hollinger for having that ready to go after this win they had, because I had to read this like 5 times when I saw that. Unbelievable what's happened with the Hawks.
It's like the that Duke North Carolina stats for over like 25 years, where they were like within 1 point of each other.
Yeah.
And also for somebody that's the king of Broadway, that's not very regal to be mid.
No, not at all. Yeah, it's definitely not good for the king of Broadway. Not good for the brand at all. They may have to, it makes heads are gonna have to roll, and there may be some guillotines out for what's going on with the Hawks if the king is looking so embarrassing in this light with being so mid right now this season. But back on the Mavericks, the Hawks got back to 500 with this win over the Mavericks. So the Mavs now in the 11th seed, and more importantly, the Mavs are the 10th worst team in the NBA. What that means is the top 10 protected pick that the Mavs own the Knicks from the Kristaps Porzingis trade would not convey for the Knicks if Dallas remains in the top 10 once we get to the draft lottery. The Dallas Mavericks will keep their pick. Now, they are currently 1 game behind OKC for the final play-in spot in the West. Dallas' next game is against the Sacramento Kings on Wednesday. So there's been talk about, should the Dallas Mavericks lose these 3 games so they ensure that they can get that top 10 pick, because the odds, if they fall to 11, like drastically change whether or not they can keep their pick. Because essentially, if they fall to 11 or 12 or any of these numbers, they eventually have to have like an 80% chance of not getting their pick. But if they stay in the top 10, or they stay at 10, they basically have a 90% chance of keeping their pick. But this is also the Dallas Mavericks, a team with a lot of expectations, a team that wanted to make the playoffs, a team that just traded for Kyrie Irving. So you would think that also will be a motivation for them. So before we get even on the Knicks standpoint, like, what would you do right now if you're Dallas?
Okay, so a couple things. They play the Kings Wednesday night. Kings are basically locked into the 3 seed. It looks like they can catch Memphis. If they win out, the Grizz lose out. Phoenix is not going to catch them. So I think for all intents and purposes, they're locked into the 3 seed. So we'll see if they play their stars. I assume there's still a full week left in the regular season. So wouldn't think they'd sit everybody out, but maybe they'll stagger. De'Aaron Fox sits out Monday, Sabonis sits out Thursday, that type of thing. Maybe they'll do that. We'll see how that plays itself out. After that, the Mavs play the Bulls Friday night. That could end up being not the most important game of the next season, but up there. The Bulls currently are 38-40. The Mavs are 37-42. So if the Mavs win Wednesday, they'd be 38-42, and the Bulls lose. Those 2 teams could essentially decide whether the because OKC is also at 38-41, and Minnesota's at 39-40. So there's a lot of flip flopping, but that could essentially decide whether the Bulls are 10 and the Mavs are 11, or the Mavs are 11 and the Bulls are 10. Yes. So to your point, there was also a Shams report, Shams Charania of The Athletic, on a podcast, or I saw a clip on Twitter. So I think it was a live stream, basically saying that the Mavs have had internal discussions whether to sit Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving the final 3 games, which would be shocking in the sense that they obviously are just a game behind the Thunder, but the Thunder on the tiebreak, so they need to win out and then have the Thunder lose at least 1 game, because they have to pass OKC in the standings. So maybe if the Dallas, maybe they'll play their guys Wednesday night. If they're mathematically eliminated by Friday night, they sit their 2 guys out, in particular for that Bulls game. And yes, so the Knicks, just to clarify on the Knicks point, the pick from the Porzingis trade is top 10 protected. So if the Knicks don't get it this year, it's still top 10 protected next year, and then top 10 protected the next year after that. Then it transfers to a 2nd round pick. So it's not like the Knicks would, you assume with Luka Doncic they would at least be not one of the 10 worst teams in the NBA last season. But we said that coming into the season, and they traded for a Hall of Famer in his prime, and look where they are. But from the Mavs perspective, you could certainly understand why they would have faith that they'd be in one of the 10 best teams in the NBA, then transfer, the 23rd overall pick next season and keep the 10th pick this year. The reason why the Knicks could still get the pick if the Mavs finish the regular season with the 10th worst record, as EJ talked about, is a team in the 11, 12, 13, 14 could jump up into the top 4. Again, very slim odds. I think it's less than 2% for each of those teams. So again, it's like 93% that the Mavs would keep their pick. The irony of all ironies, of course, would be if they sit Luka and Kyrie and then finish with the 10th worst record, and then a team jumps them in the lottery, then they still transfer the pick. So craziness could be abound. Do I think the Mavs should tank the final 3 games? I don't think they can. I think you send the wrong message to Luka, to the organization, to your fans. Listen, if by Friday night they're mathematically eliminated, then all bets are off. Then you want to lose the Bulls game on purpose, so be it. But I don't think you can go into Wednesday night still with a chance to qualify for the postseason, however slim that chance is, and have a team with Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving and lose the game and then sit those guys. I personally, I know the league would have a problem with it. It'd be a major talking point. I just think it would send the wrong message to everybody involved.
Yeah, I assume once that Shams report came out that the NBA, I assume they called the Dallas Mavericks. I think that would have to have been a very serious conversation, because the whole point of the play-in tournament was to drive interest in the final games of the season, was to keep these teams who are kind of in a situation where maybe they would say, all right, we could just mail it and say, hey, well, we can still make the playoffs even though we're the 10th seed. So why not just, play it out, since we're not going to have a chance at a top pick anyway. But this became such a unique situation. I don't think the NBA could have ever really thought about, that a team could have a top 10 pick that is also a team that thought they were title contenders, but is in a position where maybe if they lose, it'll be better for them to keep that pick, as opposed to trying to get into a playing situation that they don't control their own destiny. Like, they can win all these 3 games and still not make the playoffs. So that is not something the league could have thought about, which is why we're now having this very interesting conversation when it comes to the Dallas Mavericks. And just to put these odds, in context, like right now, the Oklahoma City Thunder are the 11th team in this thing. So if Dallas were to 4-11, they would be in this spot. Right now, Oklahoma City has a 9.4% chance of getting into the top 4. If Dallas were to fall in that spot, that would be their chances of keeping their lottery pick. Because if they don't get into the top 4, you can't move up to 7, or you can't move up to 8. It doesn't work like that. If you're outside of the top 4, you can only get to the top 4. That's as high as you can't get into 6 or 7 or anything like that. All you can do is fall back. They can fall back, but that's
the NBA format is they just draw. The NBA format is they just draw, for those that may not be sure. They just draw. They have the lottery hopper, and it's actually 4 numbers, not 1 number. But they draw for the first 4 seeds. After the first 4 seeds are drawn, then it's strictly record order after that.
Yes, exactly. So this is very interesting when it comes to like what Dallas will do. I anticipate that they'll play until they realize that they're not going to make the playoffs. I don't think that they'll sit their guys early because I think that it would send a really bad message for the entire league and for a league that is trying to build goodwill about the fact that its regular season does matter when people are upset about it.
I will say this. One, the Mavs could finish with the 11th most record in the league and still the Knicks not get their pick because they could jump up into the top.
Exactly.
One other thing to keep in mind. I just, as far as the league and Silver getting the phone and, with the Mavs, the one thing, if anybody was going to tweak the NBA and just give an FU to the league, it's Cuban, who's already protesting a game. He's furious with the referees. I've actually had a conversation with him via Twitter direct message. He reached out to me actually and let me know that I tweeted that the NBA is moving in the right direction. The referees are doing some, they're preparing, more diligently. There's more film review. He went on a tangent, and AJ, I'll show you the DMs.
Yeah, you gotta show me that guy. Screenshot that one for me.
I will do, but he just basically explained that I couldn't be further from the truth, and he has proprietary information that I certainly don't have access to. So let's just say there's bad blood between the league and the Mavs.
And don't forget, remember they protested the Jalen Brunson, or at least they wanted the tampering charges on Jalen Brunson. That I guess they won. It was like a late first round pick. The Knicks lost from like 4 or 5 years from now, but nonetheless, it's been a frustrating year for Mark Cuban all around. His team hasn't played well. The coach hasn't performed all that well, and Jason Kidd. So, if there's anybody who would definitely want to tweak the NBA, I agree. It is Mark Cuban. For the Knicks, if they aren't able to get this pick this season, like how much you think it would impact like how they approach this offseason, because they wouldn't have a first round pick. They traded that for Josh Hart. So it does become a little interesting in regards to how flexible they could be with making a big trade this summer, or maybe even during the draft season when that comes around.
Exactly. The important piece here is not only obviously would they not have a 11th overall pick, 12th overall pick, which they could use and add the rotation or flip the guy or whatever the case might be, they wouldn't be able, because of the stipend rule, they wouldn't be able to make a trade for involving future draft picks until their draft pick was made. So later in the draft or after the day after the draft, et cetera, during free agency, they could still make the pick because then they would have their own 2024 pick. But they would not have a 2023 pick. So that would kind of complicate things. So yes, make no mistake, the Knicks are hoping for multiple reasons, especially if a superstar shakes loose and you need extra draft capital, that the pick conveys this season. Because again, obviously, common sense would tell you that the Mavs would be much better next season, whether they get rid of Kyrie or not.
Exactly.
They're very unlikely to be on the borderline. Most people didn't assume that the 10th wouldn't even come into play, because that the Mavs would make the playoffs, or at least at the worst case scenario, if they were going to miss the playoffs, be the 14th, 13th seed, and here they are potentially 9, 10. So we'll see.
Yeah, and with the Knicks having to make decisions about who to pay this offseason, does Obi Toppin get traded? Like, there's also the idea the Knicks may want to have just drafted a guy to maybe replace somebody in this rotation. Like, there's a chance that I don't think there's any chance, obviously, that IQ anybody leaves. But if there's some movement in this roster, that's a pick they could have had. If you have a 11th, 12th pick in the draft or whatever, you're standing at, like, you have a chance to get a player who is in the rotation next season, a guy who can contribute, or a guy who maybe has a pretty high ceiling. So they would have liked to have had that pick, whether it was to move it or whether to keep it. So it will be interesting to see what the Dallas Mavericks do, but a fascinating situation happening with Dallas, and it directly involves the Knicks and whether or not they will get this top 10 protected draft pick this season. But that's going to do it.